from gun violence and saving lives. But we are not going to be talking about gun violence today with Fred Guttenberg. We're going to talk about some of these protests throughout the country and the comments of Ilhan Omar, which I know Fred has a lot to say about. Fred, it's such a pleasure to have you on again. Thank you for the time, sir. How are you?
Hey, how are you, man?
Doing okay. Crazy times we're living in right now, Fred. Had your friend Joe Walsh on the other day. I love what you guys are doing and touring and speaking to people. I have to ask you this question to start.
Yeah.
What do you make of these protests in general? Because, you know, some people want to phrase them on these college campuses as pro-Palestine protests, but I characterize them as anti-Israel and in some cases anti-Jewish protests.
Listen, they're not pro-Palestine marches. I am very supportive of everyone living in peace. These are anti-Israel. These are anti-Semitic. These are efforts to keep Jewish students from being able to freely walk across a campus and go to school, from freely walking across a campus and engage in social activity, from potentially being able to go to a graduation that they have spent years earning the right to go to. No, these are not pro-Palestine. These are anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and I will tell you, it's not the majority of people doing it, but you have these agitators who won't show their faces. They're all wearing masks, medical masks and otherwise, to hide themselves. Whether or not they're all students, we don't know because they cover up their faces.
Cowardly. It's cowardly, Fred. I agree with you.
Cowards.
And you said something on social media, and we agree on this as well. Not everybody at these protests we would necessarily characterize as anti-Semitic. That would be unfair. But there's a lot of misinformed kids, as you put it, on social media today. I talk about this all the time. They have no idea what's going on in the Middle East. They have no idea who Hamas is. They have no idea how this started, right?
They don't understand that Hamas is not Gaza. Hamas is a terrorist group. Unfortunately, they set up base in Gaza. They used Gaza. They morphed with the population. They took over the hospitals. They took over the schools. They turned Gaza citizens into human shields. They are a terrorist group supported and funded by Iran. Okay. And I think that's a really important part of this conversation, because we do have countries, Iran, China, and Russia, who will do anything and everything to destabilize the United States, to destabilize what's happening in our country, especially leading into the next election. And we must be careful that we don't allow them to do it, that we understand what's coming from it. Listen, these kids, they don't understand. They don't know the truth about Israel and what Israel stands for. And it's very, very, very hard for me to watch.
As is for me as well. Let's talk a little bit about free speech and where the line should be drawn, at least in my opinion. I want to get your thoughts on this. When you hear people chanting death to Israel, death to America, or if somebody chants death to Jews, that has happened at some of these protests. Don't you think there should be a line that should be drawn? This is private property. It's not like they're on some public Eastman sidewalk somewhere, right? This is universities. This is private property. Do you think if someone chants death to America or death to Jews on private property that they should be arrested for that?
Listen, change it up a little bit and say, name any other group, death to, and a line would be drawn. Okay. It's not being drawn when they're saying death to Jews. And it is really, again, it's so disturbing for me to watch. And I see these kids, because they are uninformed and getting caught up in a hysteria that may cost them so dearly, because they may get kicked out of school. And actually they should. If they're engaging in this, they should get kicked out of school. But all of these kids who think they have purity of purpose, what they may end up doing with all of these protests is causing a guy like Trump to get reelected. And what they don't understand, if that happens, their desire to be future leaders is over. It's not going to happen. They are costing themselves dearly. I don't think they're bad kids. I think they're misinformed. There are bad people who are agitating. But I don't
Yes.
think all those kids are bad kids.
Speaking of bad people, and listen, I don't like to use that term for specific individuals. I'm not a big fan of Ilhan Omar. I know you're not either. And when it comes to gun control issues, you and I are the first people to go on social media and go after people on the far right that don't care. They just don't care. But then I think of somebody like Ilhan Omar or a Rashida Tlaib. And Omar's comments the other day, when asked about anti-Semitism, she couldn't just denounce it, right? She had to do a cheap shot towards Jewish people. And she said, doesn't matter whether you're pro-genocide or not. Fred, I don't know one Jewish person in this country that is pro-genocide that has ever said anything even close to that. I'm sure you don't either. What did you make of those comments that Ilhan Omar made the other day?
She is despicable and reprehensible. She should not be serving in Congress. Listen, I call out right, I call out wrong. I call out far right or far left. Okay. I'm a crazy pragmatist. I am a guy who stands firmly in the middle of this country. And I think she is as bad and as wrong as all of the evil, despicable people who engage in January 6th. The thing is, what she is doing is when she says you're either a pro-genocide Jew or an anti-genocide Jew, she is going to cause violence to happen against Jewish people. And so, listen, I hope she is held accountable. I hope she is censured. I hope she is primaried and forced out of Congress. I think she is the worst example of what we are in America. And I hope that she is held accountable for her actions.
You've met a lot of people on Capitol Hill because of what you do and your advocacy for gun control. Have you ever spoken to any members of the squad? I mean, I don't have a problem with Ocasio-Cortez, but a Bush, for example, or a Tlaib or Omar, have you ever spoken to them and had any private time with them?
The answer is yes. When I was dealing, on this issue, and they were there on this issue. The problem is when they realized, when it became about needing to defend me for being Jewish, they weren't. They disappeared. And so I despise what they stand for. Just because they're Democrats doesn't mean I need to stand with them. I am a big believer in the Democratic Party. I believe the leadership of the Democratic Party is doing all that they can to help hold democracy up. And I know the leadership of the Democratic Party is not at all in favor of the behavior of the squad. Yeah. And so I'm proud to support the Democratic Party, but the squad needs to be gone.
I completely agree with you 150%. If you're just joining us, Fred Guttenberg talking about Ilhan Omar's comments. Joe Biden, Joe Biden. You've spent time with Joe Biden. You're a supporter, as I am, of Joe Biden. Yes. How do you think he's handled this? I think he's in a very difficult situation. I think he's handled it probably best he can. How do you think Joe Biden's handled this whole situation?
Listen, he's in a really difficult spot. The politics of this are incredibly difficult, but he continues to be on the right side of this. He made a really important statement today about what's happening on campuses. He has defended Israel, not defended everything they've done, because everything they've done hasn't been appropriate. And I can say that, I'm pro-Israel. I'm not pro-Netanyahu. Okay. So not everything they've done has been accurate or appropriate. And so he's been on the right side of this. What I'll say about President Biden is this. Every time I worry he's not doing enough, I realize he has far more patience and understanding of history than I do, because in the end, he always seems to land in the right place with issues like this. I'm not patient. I don't have the knowledge of history that he does. I trust his approach. I know Anthony Blinken is doing everything he can on the national and international stage. We have 6 months until an election. Yeah, we got to get this right.
A couple more quick questions and then we'll let you go. I wanted to, your video went viral, the video of you and Brett Kavanaugh where you reach out your hand and he doesn't shake your hand. You've talked about that time and time again. You've talked about that on this show. But, Brett Kavanaugh and some of these Supreme Court justices are the reasons why what took place in Arizona. Luckily, they repealed that crazy bill from in the 1800s. We saw what happened in Alabama. What do you make of that? I mean, you were there when Brett Kavanaugh was getting sworn in, right? You were there. What do you make of what the Supreme Court justices on the far right have done in overturning Roe versus Wade? And what is going on in this country when it comes to the issue of abortion?
Listen, they're doing exactly what we feared they would do. And when Brett Kavanaugh wouldn't shake my hand, it was because I introduced myself as Fred Guttenberg, father of Jaime Guttenberg, who was murdered in Parkland. He couldn't deal with the idea of gun violence because he knew where he stood on these issues. And we've already seen that on the court. I think, having sat in the Supreme Court and listened to some of these hearings, in the questioning and in the tone of those on the far right, you can see their disdain for democracy. You can see their disdain for freedom. And so we're seeing it now. What I'll say is, because of what happened in Arizona, any concern over Arizona maybe being on the fence politically, I think Joe Biden's going to be safe there. And I think we're going to have a Democratic senator in Arizona, because America, every chance they get to vote on this issue, they are repudiating the Supreme Court. They are saying, no, this is not what we want. And it will happen again.
Yeah.
If we vote, we better
Agree.
vote.
You know, on the issue of the Palestine-Israeli conflict and so many others, John Fetterman, I've become a big fan of his.
He's terrific, isn't he?
Yeah, isn't he great when it comes to his pro-Israel stance, when it comes to calling out and being honest when it comes to our border issues? And he just seems like he's on the right side of almost every issue. What do you make of this guy? And even some Republicans are finally starting to change their tune about him.
You know, because he doesn't try to fit into a political box.
Mm-hmm.
He's John Fetterman. He says it the way he sees it. He says what he thinks. He's a proud Democrat. He certainly aligns in his political philosophy there, but that doesn't mean he just has to fall into line on every little thing and fit into a box. And he doesn't try to. And he's just so smart about it. But I respect people who speak freely about what they believe, and he does.
Right. And not for ratings or to sell a book or to make money. Yeah, and I could not agree with you more. Fred, before I let you go, I want to give you the opportunity. You run so many different charitable organizations raising money and for people that are suffering from loss, and sadly, you know that better than anybody, as do I. Giving people the gift of an animal, of a dog, right? I don't even want to ask you about Noam and that whole situation. I'm sure you have an opinion there, but you could talk about that if you want to. What a ridiculous.
Listen, I'll only say this: vote for people who love dogs. Okay. What she did, that's who she is, and the idea that she thought sharing it would go over well just shows how warped and demented they are. But yeah, through our foundation, listen, we've started an initiative, and our foundation is Orange Ribbons for Jaime. We've started an initiative called Paws of Love, where we are giving 8 to 10-week-old puppies to families affected by gun violence, and the entire first year, all the medical, all the food, all the grooming, all the training, the toys, the crate, we give it all. We know what our dogs have meant to us. Yeah. And we want to be able to help others.
Fred, have so much admiration for you and your family and what you continue to do in helping so many people. Fred, appreciate the time as always, my friend. And hopefully we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Got it. Take care.
Take care. You too. Fred Guttenberg, so much respect for him. He's such a wonderful man. And the tragedy that he and his family had to endure, I won't wish that upon anyone.